So picture this. A pipe bursts, your roof starts leaking, or maybe the water heater just finally gives out. It's that nightmare scenario every single homeowner dreads. Today, we're going to go inside a real-world case study to really understand what happens when water gets into your home and why literally every second counts. Okay, let's get into it. I want you to really imagine this. This is your living room right now, and water is just spreading. What you decide to do or not do over the next couple of days is going to be the difference between a manageable cleanup and a catastrophic bank account draining reconstruction project. So, what's the most important thing you need to know? This right here is the critical window. You see, after just 24 hours, the real enemy, the one you can't see at first, starts to mobilize. We are talking about mold colonization. And once that gets a foothold, you're not just drying stuff out anymore. You are fighting a biological invasion. This one time frame, it changes everything. And that right there brings us to our first big idea. This whole thing is a ticking clock. The damage you see with your own eyes right at the beginning, that's just the start. The real deep destruction happens when you wait, and it happens in some very specific, very predictable ways. You know, what's so wild about this is how the damage just cascades. It's not just a wet spot on the carpet. That water is sneaky. It starts wicking its way up inside your drywall, turning all that insulation into a soggy, completely useless mess. It gets under those beautiful hardwood floors, causing them to warp and buckle. Your baseboards and trim start to swell up, paint begins to peel, and then you see it, the visible mold. If you leave it unchecked, you're looking at the absolute worst case scenario, actual structural rot. So you might be wondering, why does this clock seem to tick so much faster in some places than in others? Well, that's a great question, and it brings us to our second section, where we're going to explore how a high-risk environment can create a perfect storm. We're going to use Central Florida as our case study to really see this in action. And wow, this table just breaks it down perfectly, doesn't it? In a place like Lake Mary, Florida, that year-round subtropical humidity is basically like throwing gasoline on a fire for mold growth. Then you add over 50 inches of rain every year, a high water table that's constantly pushing moisture up through the foundation, and these intense summer storms that can drive water through any tiny crack in your roof or window seals. You're living in an environment that is actively trying to get water into your home. Okay, so let's recap. The situation is pretty dire, right? The clock is ticking. The environment is hostile. So what does the right response actually look like? This brings us to Section 3. The professional response. And the number one rule? Speed. We are not talking about scheduling an appointment for next Tuesday. No way. A real emergency response means a certified team is on site with all their equipment in under an hour. That speed is what slams the brakes on that cascading damage we were just looking at. It's the first, and honestly, the most critical step in taking back control from the water. So who are these professionals, really? You're going to hear this acronym thrown around, IICRC. This isn't just some company's brand name. Think of it as the certification board, the globally recognized standard for the entire industry. An IICRC certified technician isn't just some guy with a wetback. They are trained in the actual science of drying, and they follow a documented, proven protocol that your insurance company is going to recognize and respect. And that whole protocol, it's not just random chaos. It follows 3 really clear phases. It all kicks off with that first emergency call and getting the team on the road immediately. Then comes the most important part, Phase 2, mitigation and drying. This is where all the scientific work happens. And finally, only when the structure is verifiably data-proven dry can the final restoration, the rebuild, begin. See? It's a system, not just a scramble. All right, let's zoom in on that second phase because honestly, this is where the real magic happens. Section 4. The science of drying. And this is so important. It's not about making things feel dry to the touch. It is about proving it with hard data. Man, this chart just lays it all out, plain and simple. The DIY approach with a shop vac and some house fans, it's total guesswork. You might get the water on the surface, sure, but you are completely missing the hidden moisture that's trapped inside the walls or under the floorboards. The pros? They use these huge truck-mounted extractors. They don't guess. They use thermal imaging to literally see water you can't, and they use special tools to measure moisture in the air itself. That's the science of psychrometrics. This data-driven approach is what actually stops mold in its tracks. And check this out. This is the arsenal they bring to the fight. Thermal cameras find those cold spots that scream hidden water.
Calibrated moisture meters give exact readings of how wet materials are. And it's not just fans, it's a carefully calculated system of commercial-grade dehumidifiers and high-velocity air movers working together to create a controlled drying environment. The key takeaway here is that every single tool is about measurement and control.
All right, so we've covered a lot, right? We've seen the problem, how the environment makes it worse, and the science behind the solution. So let's bring it all together in our final section, what you, as a property owner, absolutely have to know.
Okay, first things first, let's talk about the one thing everyone cares about, money. Just look at this chart. The cost of an immediate professional cleanup is just a tiny fraction of what you'll end up paying for a delayed remediation. And that huge, scary bar on the right, that's not just the cost of drying things. That's the cost of drying things plus mold removal plus major structural repairs. Waiting doesn't save you a dime. It multiplies the cost.
So if you remember nothing else from this, please remember these key points. First, speed is everything. That 48-hour clock, it is not a scare tactic. It is real. Next, you have to know your local environment because those unique risks are always there. Third, professional restoration is a science based on data, not just a cleanup job. And this one is huge for your wallet. That science produces all the documentation, the data, the photos, the logs that you absolutely need to get your insurance claim approved. And finally, never forget that trying to do it yourself often leads to much, much costlier damage down the road.
You know, I'm going to end with a quote from our source material that it sums this whole thing up perfectly. Waiting 24 hours to address water damage allows mold colonization to begin, turning a cleanup job into a full remediation project. It's that simple. Waiting one day is the difference between drying a structure and fighting an infestation. So there you have it. We've basically just dissected a household disaster from start to finish. We've seen the science of the response, but here's the real question I want to leave you with. You now know what happens when water attacks, but do you know what to do before it does?